Well, good morning. I woke up, as I could hear throughout the crowd, as some of you did this morning, with something going on here. So, happy we have to turn me up by the end of this. We are going to go through Advent, and this week's Advent theme is hope. And we're going to go to the traditional text of Isaiah 9. And honestly, I think we read this text every year, and I'm not sure we really get down and discover it. For sake of time, we're going to read and teach at the same time this week, instead of reading through the text and then coming back through it. Hope is what keeps you from despair, whether or not you know it. If you talk to people who are in the Jewish camps, if you were to talk to any types of prisoners of war, if you talk to people who have had long suffering of illness or long suffering of outward type, it is something beyond their circumstances that keeps the drive going, that allows them to press forward, to get up, to take the next step. Hope keeps us from despair because it focuses us on our destiny. Our hope, our destiny is found in one, and his name is Jesus. If you were just to fall into life here on earth and you were to pick up an Old Testament and you were to read it from Genesis to Malachi, you would see that the Old Testament has a bunch of stories that they don't have good endings. There's promises that are not yet kept. There are prophecies that are not fulfilled. And the Old Testament it starts that way. Like the book of Genesis, it starts in creation and it ends in a coffin. Genesis starts in creation, and Malachi, the last book, ends in silence. 400 years of silence. And the Old Testament was meant to project forward your gaze, to make you look distant, because it's not the rest of the story. It's not the end of the book. In Isaiah 9, we come to this text that is around 750 BC, all right? So maybe 1,500 years or so into biblical times, depending on how you date it. Half that time until the coming of the Messiah. And we've got this divided kingdom. We've got the northern kingdom that has been disobedient and under God's discipline. And Isaiah drops right in the middle of the prophetic books. And it's a major prophet. And Isaiah the prophet comes and he gives to the people a hard but hopeful message. And by the time we get to Isaiah 9, it says, "But there will be no gloom for her who was in anguish." And he's talking about Israel. He's talking about those who are divided. He's talking about those who have been conquered. He's talking about those who are under what seems to be punishment, but God's discipline. In former time, he brought into contempt the land of Zebulun and the land of Naphtali, and I think it's just an idiom for the northern kingdom. It's just saying those who have divided, those who have gone away and astray, those who are under discipline. But in the latter time, he has made glorious the way of the sea. It's the only time this phrase is here in the Bible, but it's throughout Hebrew literature forever. And it was just a roadway system that went up and down the coast of modern-day Israel. The land beyond the Jordan, Galilee of the nations. But in this latter time, he's starting to give a hint. He's starting to lift the gaze. Yes, you're under discipline. Yes, things are tough. Yes, your circumstances seem dismal. But don't go to despair. Because there's a time yet to come. And the people, and in good Hebrew poetic form, he's going to give two sets of contrasts. The people who walked in darkness. The people who dwell in a land of deep darkness. Those who walked in darkness have seen a great light. Those who dwelt in a land of deep darkness, on them has light shone. You, verse 3, that being God the Father, I believe, you have multiplied the nation. You have increased its joy. In the midst of this dismal situation in the book of Isaiah, the word joy is used 24 times to bring them back, that even though this is your circumstance, it's not your calling. Even though this is where you sit, it's not where you find your identity. And so, Christian, today you may be going through all kinds of things. But your circumstances don't define you. Jesus defines you. Your pain doesn't become your person. He is who you are. You, God, have multiplied the nation. You have increased its joy. They rejoice before you as with joy at the harvest. So a new crop has come in. The gathering of the hard work, the profit of what we've done, He has blessed. And they are glad when they divide the spoil, that there's enough to go around and around and around. Verse 4, for the yoke of his burden and the staff for his shoulder, the rod of his oppressor. So all these things that have been upon them, who have been hard upon them, that have been heavy upon them, who have hurt them, you, God, have broken, as on the day of Midian. So he's taking off the burden from the backs of his people. Though they have carried it for a time, there's a time where he is to remove it. Remember the day of Midian. And he's talking about Gideon here. Remember, he had 10,000 soldiers to go out and fight. And God said, no, that's too many. And yet the enemy had 10 times that. And he said, you need to cull some out. And he did it once, he did it twice. And God takes that army of 10,000 and builds it up to 300. And then he marches into battle, because it's not of our doing. Overcoming our circumstances is not just being tough enough, determined enough, good enough, smart enough, bright enough. That God is taking off this burden. He's done it before, time and time and time again. For every boot of the tramping warrior and battle tumult, and every garment rolled in blood will be burned as fuel for the fire. We read this every year and we're like, what is going on here? And it's much like Isaiah 22, or Isaiah 2, I think it's verse 22, where it says he's going to take their swords, take their spears, turn them into pruning forks, turn them into farm tools. That there's going to be a time, can you imagine this in our day, where there is no more war? I read a historical book of the European continent. And over 500 years of time until modern day history, there's never ever been a 5-year period where there has not been bloodshed over war, over boundaries, over something in Europe. So when we start talking about a land of peace, a land without blood, a land without war, we don't even know what that looks like, honestly. And yet that's where we're headed. That's where we're headed. And then he gets to the part that we do understand, because we're 2,000 years later. For to us a child is born. To us a son is given. The government shall be upon his shoulder. His name shall be called Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. There's a lot going on here. The Messiah is coming to be the Prince of Peace. He will rule over God's people, Micah. He will rule over the world, Zechariah. The government will be on his shoulder to this child who is born. He was born into the nation of Israel, to us as one of the covenant people. The government being on his shoulder is of the robe that he will wear, both as Messiah and King. He will be responsible to govern the nation and to keep it going. He has 4 descriptive names here. Wonderful, which means exceptional, distinguished, awesome, beyond knowing, wonderful. Counselor. We take this word and we modernize it. It doesn't mean like someone you would go seek counsel for mental health or something like that, though it could encompass that. Counselor means more of like a Christoph, an advocate, someone who is going to stand and take on your case, and they're going to plead your case for you. He's going to stand before the Father and say, they are innocent because I am innocent. They are righteous because I am righteous. They are welcome because I am welcome. Isn't that great? You have an advocate where you don't even have to say a word. Jesus stands there. I was at a conference once where it was on lasting in ministry, and the guy who got up, you may know this name, his name's Dick Lucas. He's about 130 years old. And he was the last speaker of the conference, and he had flown in from somewhere, and he had laryngitis, and he couldn't really speak. He was trying to get his voice together. He's a giant of a man, and again, he's ancient of days. And I leaned over to Jen, and I just said, he doesn't have to say a word. All he has to do is stand there. Because when you look at him, he's been faithful for 60 years in ministry. Without scandal. A deliverer of the word. And even infinite amount of times more than Dick Lucas, Jesus Christ stands. And he's wonderful. And he's our advocate. He is mighty God. This was Isaiah giving us an insight that the one who was coming was not just a human that was spectacular, but he was going to combine divinity and humanity in one. That the one that he spoke of in the far distant future for them was whom they had referred to from the beginning in Messiah. Remember, this was a hope since Genesis 3, since the fall of humanity, since the sin that Adam and Eve fell into. It was said there is one of the woman's seed, a child, who will come forth and who will step on the head of this serpent of old. This is that Almighty God. This deliverer will also be called the everlasting Father. And it's confusing because it seems like, hey, wait a second, you're messing up the Trinity here. I thought it was Jesus. It is Jesus. The Trinity exists in 3-person. And though you could make an argument that this is just showing how that 3-person acts as one, everlasting Father is an idiom used to describe the Messiah's relationship to time, that he is the Father of all time. From eternity past to eternity future, he sits, he rests. He was there at creation. He was there at your salvation. He was there at your redemption. He will be there at your regeneration, and he will be there forever and ever and ever and ever in glory on end. He is the everlasting Father. The Messiah, a descendant of David, will fulfill this promise for which the nation had been waiting. He is the Prince of Peace. The one who will bring in and maintain the time of millennial peace, when the nation will be properly related to the Lord, when Israel comes back to its senses. So the Messiah, seated on David's throne, will have an eternal rule of peace and justice that will have no end. It will go on forever and ever and ever. He will rule for eternity. He will maintain righteousness. As we said earlier, there will be no war, no blood, no tears, no fear. This is our hope. This is our hope from the beginning of humanity to the end of humanity and in the midst of our own humanity. Wonderful Counselor, mighty God, everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Of the increase of his government and of peace there will be no end on the throne of David and over the kingdom, to establish it and to uphold it with justice and righteousness, this time forevermore. And then it ends. It ends as though you're like, this is a story that is too good to be true. And so he punctuates it with the zeal, the passion, the force, the ability, capacity, the zeal of the Lord, Yahweh, the Lord of hosts, will do this. He will. He will. Imagine the time when the Christ child came. 300 Old Testament prophecies, which were mostly forgotten, which Israel rejected him because they had thought, that's not the way this is going to end. But in that birth, in this season in which we celebrate, everything that was told of him, with a few exceptions that are yet to come, a book that was full of unfinished stories, a book that had promises that weren't kept, prophecies that were unfulfilled, instantaneously proved that God was who he says he is. He does what he says he will do. And he is faithful and he is true. In that, as we have seen him, we expect of him, is our hope. Jesus is coming. He is and he will be the fulfillment of all prophecy. Jesus is going to make things right that are not right today. Where you struggle, where you're fearful, where you have anxiety, all of that is going to be gathered up and put away. Where there's hurt, where there's harm, where there's hardship between peoples, where there's blood, where there's war, it's all going to be gone. And when we step into this season, let us not be complacent with the thought, oh yeah, we're going to sing Emmanuel one more time. I like that song. Don't get so complacent with holy things that you reach out and touch them flippantly. But respect, honor, remember that Jesus is our Lord. Jesus is our hope. And in this season, we remember. For our active application, we're going to do communion. I'm going to ask the people to come up. Jazzy and Igor have a song that they're going to play in the background. But I want you to consider, where's your hope? Is your hope in your effort, or is your hope in what he is accomplishing? Confess what needs to be confessed. We do not come to the table in an unrighteous manner. If you are a child of God, if you have put your faith in him, then the table is open for you to partake. If not, then just wait. Wait until you come to that faith. But if you're not there today, please see me after this. I'd love to know where your hesitations are. I'd love to pray with you and talk to you further.